I had to start with this, an IKEA coffin. Brilliant, simply brilliant. Board Me Social Club, Artist Journal, December 27th, 2022, Berlin. My name is Adrian Pocobelli, artist reporter, which longtime listeners will know, longtime being 2 months, they will know that it doesn't mean what you think it means, and no, this is not a news program, which is how I'm able to take breaks, all by design, my friends. But as you can see, I don't take a ton of breaks. When I'm in the city, it's been pretty religious, frankly, how I show up here on weekdays. I did, the first 70 episodes were daily, which is pretty cool. And it's also pretty cool to keep them short, in my opinion. Some people like them longer, some people like them shorter. So I'm just trying to just do what's necessary, in a sense, to give us what we need to have our conversation, our coffee in the morning, our digital coffee with friends here. So anyways, awesome. Again, that IKEA coffin, there's just something about it that is incredibly poetic. Board Me Social Club. Surprise. And so I guess when you actually look at the narrative of paintings, I'm often very slow to kind of figure out what's going on in these narratives sometimes. I mean, you have this massive guy in the back just kill me. I mean, not very holiday-esque, is it? It feels more like Halloween over here, with the kind of vampire tooth and dripping into this, this medieval flooring that we were pointing out yesterday on his previous work. Let me just quickly open remember this really interesting floors. So we were looking at this yesterday. They pair really nicely together, actually, and they have sold out now, I think. Now they're at 15. And so anyways, really cool work by Board Me Social Club. And yeah, this kind of weird, surreal setting and these roses, some symbolism. I mean, we see a lot of contemporary clothing. Like Board Me Social Club is a really, really interesting artist. He gave a shout out yesterday. Shout out back, Board Me Social Club. But just weird, interesting decisions like putting white tube socks with the Birkenstocks, kind of a faux pas, but it happens often here in Germany. You'll actually see that. So what I wanted to point out was a different take on contemporary clothing, like an alternative, because often we'll see I put New Balance in just little sketches here, but other people will put, whatever it is, Nike or, typical footwear. Birkenstocks I don't remember seeing. And also he put Doc Martens. So that was also a very original. Maybe you can see it. Maybe I'll try and make it bigger again here. So Doc Martens. So just really interesting, with the cargo pants, military fatigues, whatever you would call them. So there's a lot going on here. And I don't want to spend too much time on it. But anyway, I could not resist. When the work was made for me with the IKEA coffin, because that is just it's almost like a modern take on that Magritte with the coffin. We'll quickly look at that. And this is also, there's a couple of directions we could go here. This is also an example of black humor, what Andre Breton called black humor. And maybe we should look at, let's just do a very quick, so Magritte coffins, and then we'll look at Andre Breton. That is a very good book, by the way. It's an anthology. I think it was put together by Breton. Yeah, so kind of reminiscent of this Magritte here, right? And again, black humor, as the surrealists would call it. So there's another, so kind of reminiscent of that with Board Me Social Club. Let's just go to Andre Breton. I highly recommend this book, by the way, Black Humor. Anthology of Black Humor. Let's actually get some, this is the version I have. And there's an essay at the start, which is excellent, which totally describes the surrealist view on humor and how it's kind of dark humor. And then it's an incredibly excellent anthology, which includes Ambrose Bierce. I think they call it the Devil's Dictionary, which is, again, just kind of like dark humor, I think is what we'd call it now. And so anyways, highly recommended. I should actually reorder that for myself. I haven't read it in like 15 years, but it's kind of crucial, in my opinion, to understanding the surrealists. At least the humorous side, and humor is incredibly important. And, we see that, it's kind of a modern thing. We see that with, again, J.G. Ballard, kind of who wrote Crash and the Atrocity Exhibition, fairly dark novels. But what you find is it's full of humor, and what the surrealists, and Breton specifically, would call black humor. So anyways, FYI on that one. Cool work, Board Me Social Club. So it gets more interesting by the week here. So thank you, everybody, for last week's Spaces. That went fairly well, considering it was just a see what happens test space. I'm quite a bit more prepared now as to how to do this. I'm waiting to hear back from the co-host. He comes in and out, but my plan is I'm totally ready for either situation. And so anyways, this is going to be on Rug Radio. It is official. And that is tomorrow, Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that is 3:30 for me here in Berlin. And again, it would be awesome for you to come out, put a great showing there for the first Twitter Spaces on Rug Radio, which is pretty awesome. And this will go out to Spotify and everything else with the Rug Radio banner. So I need to actually create the podcast cover art. But one thing at a time here. And I'm running late here, and so it shouldn't be a huge show. Quick correction here, but would love to see everybody over here. Quick correction. So it's just an important thing. I heard back from JNK. So, and we were talking about this piece here by Limbo and Junkadelic, and JNK helped kind of bring it out, brought to you by JNK 101. You can't really see it, but it's written here. But it's very important to note, Junkadelic and JNK 101 are separate people. Because of the similarities in the name, it's easy to confuse them, but he just wanted to let me know. And he's like, you don't need to mention it, but I want to mention it because I like giving credit where credit is due. So the song is by Junkadelic, and JNK 101 is a separate entity, but he kind of, works with him, shall we say, or is a friend of his. So it goes. So that is by Junkadelic and Limbo. So again, very cool work. Just a quick shout out on that. So we've been talking about Rustic's art the last few days here, Rustic Digital Art, and he has a new work here, which we'll look at in a second. And we were talking about, actually, let's just bring it up here. We were talking about these works and just like the juxtaposition, how hard it is to be irrational. Right. And so anyways, so Rustic chimed in yesterday. Very interesting words about my work on this edition. Love the connection with Freud. And you were very on point about this series about the intention, the decision, and the search for the irrational. I call it natural stupidity as an opposite to AI. Ha ha. So isn't this interesting? Like this, you could almost see this in the context of AI in a sense, like as AI is happening, you're getting you're getting an art created by Rustic Digital Art that is pursuing consciously the irrational in a way of kind of, not subverting, but as a response, you might say, to this, what we might call super rational AI, which is so rational, like it's using so many inputs that we're starting to get crooked monitors. What I was saying yesterday are irrational results, quote unquote. So anyways, so this is super interesting. And I was saying, glad I wasn't far off the mark, and it looks good too. And he said, also, yes, I look for that too. It must strike me visually and find the balance, but the workflow is pretty much what you talked about. Being surprised by new paths, almost making new neural pathways in the brain. That's almost what's so hard. You could argue about making irrational art. You almost need to make new paths. Like for me, again, I trick myself into doing irrational things. I have my techniques for doing that. And also embracing digital mistakes. This is kind of a Warhol idea as which is to embrace the mistakes. If you make a mistake, embrace them. So a classic thing is, you're dripping accidentally on the canvas and then you embrace that. forcing some of them and making them my tools in regards to the mistakes. Forcing some mistakes and making them my tools. A lot of Control-C and Control-V. And of course, we see that with, say, the Control-V of the, crazily cropped Super Mario here. So very interesting. Great to hear from you, Rustic Digital Art. And yeah, I mean, it's incredibly interesting. This is, what he's calling the cloud period. And again, it all kind of looks, easier said than done. And it's quite difficult to do this, I would argue. And so here you have like a dog or a horse or something with 3 legs. Again, these kind of very irrational images and ideas here. So wonderful work, and get it for a song here at, a Tezos, $1.60, which is 2 Tezos these days. So anyways, very cool work and great to hear from you. And here are the other works. I picked this up for $1.60, this GN, because auctions, guys, like sometimes like they're often forgotten about and ignored if people aren't like tweeting them out, religiously on Twitter. And even then, they often get lost. Also heard from Alessio La Greca. It's always a huge pleasure seeing my works on the Pocobelli videos. My background is in oil painting, and I'm not going to lie, it's so darn tempting, the idea of doing something with different mediums here. So I didn't realize, Alessio, he might have mentioned it before, but I didn't recall. And yeah, again, and not to rehash yesterday's show, but this is crying out for some oil painting, isn't it? Or just, the temptation is there. Again, it's unclear whether that's actually a better result, but maybe the experimentation is worthwhile and to see. Continuing on, Demon Ego. We were wondering if these were physical because they kind of looked physical, and Demon Ego has confirmed that, yes, they are all physical and in real life works, which is really impressive, frankly, because again, there's no undo with physical. So Demon Ego, from the sounds of it, sounds like it's all physical work, from what I understand here. So anyways, good to hear from you, Demon Ego. The works look beautiful. Also, Uxine, so remember this piece. So I'm not sure if we followed up on it. And so we covered it when it started the auction. I'm not sure if we finished it. It went for 3.5 ETH, which is pretty darn good, $4,200 for 2 fiends. And also, Uxine had weighed in because I didn't connect the reference, but there's a reference to Frida Kahlo's 2 friends. Danke Adrian, 2 fiends is a direct reference to the 2 Fridas. So we see it here, the 2 Fridas. So, and then we go back, and there it is, right? So I feel like I should have caught that because it did seem vaguely familiar. But anyways, beautiful quoting of art history by Uxine. And to me, again, that turns this into more than just what some people might be tempted to call digital folk art. When you start having this conversation between artists and the tradition, to me, that is kind of a way of embedding yourself in the tradition. And it's kind of like the market can say what it wants, the financial market on art. Everybody can say what they want, but nobody can take that away from you. And that dialogue with the tradition is always, to me, very important in terms of, it's the difference, in my estimation, between folk art and, art of the tradition. And that's not to say one is better than the other, but in order to be a part of that tradition, generally speaking, it's good to have that conversation with it and to reference it at certain points. And this is a nice distant reference, beautifully done. So congrats to Uxine, and also great to hear from you. So this is something else I wanted to point out. So this is so I was looking at these different Fridas, right? And these different representations of the Fridas. Here it's kind of bluer. Here it's kind of grayish. And this brings kind of they almost all look like different versions to a certain degree. Here we have, looks like a photo of a monitor or something because we have these vertical lines here. You might not be able to see that on YouTube, but they're kind of some light I want to call them like CRT scan lines. And here's another version. And again, the blue and the clouds look different. So maybe this is a different version. Or maybe sometimes what happens is people will put their version. This looks like a copy, frankly, right? And so when you do a search on Google Images, this is what you're given. And we also get here, so we actually see how big it is, which is actually, I was surprised when I saw this picture at how big it is. But this is kind of what I wanted to show here. And I think this is fascinating because it's about the representation of art. And I had a series on this, and it's going to bring us back to Koons as well, what we were discussing yesterday. And I've found this fascinating. And if you get rid of the yellow here, that's basically what you have here are 4 results from the series that I did called Related Images, right? A quote of the Google image search results. And you see this Raphael work here, the Baldassare Castiglione. You see how different they are. You see the background here is brown. Here it's like a grayish blue almost. Here there's the frame, right? So this idea of how art is represented digitally. So this kind of just reminded me of that. And I've thought of doing these without the yellow mask here, just as virgin versions on Manifold XYZ, because I was like, the reason I've never released them as virgin versions is because of, well, maybe I don't think there's a copyright, which brings about a whole other conversation, because the works do transform each other and there is a concept, and in the US, that's good enough. I don't think you'd have a problem because you could easily say this is about the representation of art, and the judge goes, okay, there's a work here, right? And then you can let it go. Germany, though, if I was to publish this in Germany, I would have an issue because even a square inch of another work is considered copyright violation. So what I would have to do is were I to do this on, say, Manifold XYZ, a virgin version, kind of like you could do it with this Frida Kahlo, you could take these 4, if they were big enough and whatever, put them, in a result. I used the mobile search result. I would have to make sure it's from an American, like hopefully Manifold XYZ, if there is an address, it would be from an American location. And I'm not a lawyer and don't use this as legal advice, but I did get legal advice on this stuff because I didn't know what my kind of legal standing was, say putting some of my works on Super Rare. And what I understood, and again, I'm not a lawyer, is Super Rare is based in the US, so therefore it's under the jurisdiction of US copyright laws. So I could put my, work, say from the Screen Memory series, I could put works like this that use, works I get from the web of, say, The Birth of Venus, but because I'm transforming it and it's going on an American, platform, I'm not subject to, say, German. It's where it gets launched. And so anyway, so not to go too long on this, but it's an interesting conversation. So maybe the takeaway for you today is jurisdiction matters in regards to copyright. Okay, because maybe, even you could say like that rustic digital art using Super Mario Brothers. Also on this idea of the representation of art. Remember we were talking about Jeff Koons yesterday. And I dug this up, and this was also interesting. And I have a really nice close-up version of a Van Gogh that was also part of this series, okay? And so just take a quick look at that. And I just want to highlight what Jeff Koons was saying in this interview in the Guardian. These images, he said, are, quote, are all handmade paintings. Every mark on here has been applied by a brush. These are exact replicas visually as the originals. They're different. Now, here he says actually the opposite. They're different in size. And this is another, we always talk about the alchemical, transformation, scale as an alchemical transformation, how it just changes the work. That's why I call it alchemical, because it's just, it's different. And it's qualitatively completely different when you change the scale of a work. And so he's also applying a scale transformation on these works, which I think is hugely important. Let's continue with what he's saying. So they're not exact replicas, but you take his meaning. And because we're talking about how the cracks in the Mona Lisa are being painted, right? Which is kind of brilliant. Again, and we're back to this idea of the representation of art, okay? What we were just discussing here, okay? So it gets interesting. Okay, so continuing on. These are as exact replicas visually as the original. They're different in size. They're flat, okay? They don't have dimensional paint. In other words, a raised surface. So, and we think of this Van Gogh here. Van Gogh, he has paint sometimes, it's known to come out like as much as an inch off the canvas. Texture is crucial to Van Gogh. So this work here, we could say this replica is done purely flat, but it is an oil painting, which is super fascinating. In other words, and they're totally flat, they don't have dimensional paint because they're just the idea of the painting. They're just the idea of the painting. This is just the idea of the Mona Lisa, the idea of Leonardo da Vinci. This is the idea of Marcel Duchamp's L'H.O.O. This is the idea of Andy. So just a kind of interesting follow-up, but I thought, it's about the representation of art here as well. And again, I feel like I understand where he's coming from, he felt like it wasn't enough to have these works just change in scale and reproducing them. But I disagree. But anyways, we can have that debate. And, he's very good at what he does. So we don't need to go on about it. Quick little quote, just because we were mentioning the tradition and the conversation with the tradition. He also pointed out that many of the artists referred to in the show had influenced one another. Monet is always referencing Rubens. Manet is referencing Raphael. Everybody enjoyed Titian. Because we were just talking about this in regards to Uxine and how him referencing Frida Kahlo makes it more significant, at least in the regard to the traditions conversation. Maybe not in absolute terms, but in relative terms, from the tradition's perspective, we could argue Uxine has made his work more significant, more relevant, okay, from that perspective, not in absolute terms, but in relative terms. So here it is. Anyways, we looked at this a couple of times, but it's quite fascinating. I would absolutely love to see this in real life, right? To see how they achieved this kind of, this three-dimensionality, like the shadow here of the paint and even the canvas below, oil painting replicas. To me, that's brilliant. Feliz Navidad from Greco. I thought just a really nice drawing here of what looks like a reindeer in a chair, and here he is painting it. So pretty cool, right? So a few more Christmas works here, and this is a content warning from Minta. There's going to be some nudity, not quite coming up here, but it could be flagged. The tweet author flagged this tweet as showing sensitive content, so another awesome kind of meta screenshot by Minta. This is a 1 of 1. Did it sell already? It's been listed for $69. So anyways, really nicely done here, actually. So based on a Twitter flagging nudity, and you can almost see a nude underneath here. So pretty cool. And Merry Kinkmas. So we have our content warning here in a work by Martin Joe. So, I mean, not too sensitive of content here, but your mind could wander here a little bit. Anyway, one of these 3D works, and maybe a bit of a content warning on the tree there. The Kinky Bears wish you a Merry Kinkmas. So anyways, Martin Joe has watched this show, or we've been hearing is a longtime watcher of the show from way back when. So anyways, cool work from Martin Joe. And there's another one. So playing with the whole theme, kind of like this S&M theme, Red Dom Deer, and here does an 8-Badoo work of what looks like the reindeer. So interesting, just, taking a theme and going from different angles from Martin Joe. So pretty cool. 1 of 1 for 10 Tezos. So get a nice 1 of 1 for cheap. Here's another one by Jan Lucas Migone, the twins, in the Skin and Bones collection. So just another very nice work. Again, kind of not too dissimilar, kind of a sex and death kind of theme here, with what looks like a couple kind of in intercourse or something, and a skeleton. And there's also people here. So anyways, and then all these arms, kind of a bit of a hell scene, perhaps. Magnetism to pleasure, 1,000 desires through the skin, the feeling of being alive and dead at the same time. So maybe not such a hell scene, but anyways, fascinating work. I'll say that much. 1 of 1, has it sold? Went for $165. Pretty cool. And again, it looks like a digital work. Very nice. Continuing, puts out a lot of one-of-ones here. And again, we see the theme is just taken from so many different sides. La Danse is pretty cool here. You can get this for 2 because it's an edition of 100, but usually, putting more and more one-of-ones out. And it looks like it's actually beneficial from a financial perspective, interestingly. From a collector's point of view, like when I'm collecting, I think definitely the one-of-one does have more cachet because simply you're the only person that has it. So there is kind of an exclusivity there. Villain Mask also put this out, kind of along a different kind of vibe. My best friend is me. When you're feeling sad, lonely, disappointed, the best friend who holds your hand and rises you up, it is yourself. And this is available for 0.2 ETH on Foundation. So interesting just to follow this artist. I'm still trying to figure this artist out a little bit, so interesting. And Goro put out this beautiful work, and I figured out how to use Twitter's full screen here with these arrows. So GM from Gora, who I believe sold the work on Super Rare and, is kind of really making strides here. I thought this was a super interesting work. Looks like a digital work. GM to Gora. And this is by Tukes, and Tukes has put out a few AI works here. And so here's a new series called Mescaline Lines, buy for 30, editions of 5. I thought pretty interesting. So again, experimenting with kind of different, like it's kind of reminiscent of Miro a little bit in the kind of shapes. It's got a real Miro feel to it, but quite different. And these are AI works. I think we have the whole series here. So 4 are in the series: Williamsy, Peyote, Mescal, and Cactus. And here they are. So this is Peyote. So just kind of interesting experimentation. Buy for 50. And here is Cactus. Buy for 50. One-of-ones. And here is Mescal. So just very interesting. I wonder if it's raw AI. It's hard to say, but just more interesting abstracts. Now, interestingly, Tukes put out these other works which are not 100% abstract. And they have a darker feeling, releasing quite a bit of work. Remember, we were just looking at this series here. So perhaps there's a danger of putting out too much, but hard to say. Let's look at another series here by Tukes. So this is Dark Castle, Desolate Landscape. And so again, combining kind of, representation with this, abstract style. It's an interesting kind of a different take on it. I don't know if they're selling as well. Like maybe people are having issues with the contrast there. Like maybe they just want that kind of Juan Miro feel or Kandinsky type feel. But anyways, interesting experimentation. Here's another one. Looks pretty cool. The Scent of Decay. So kind of darker works here. Another dark work at Christmas. You see the chandelier, almost like a gothic feel to this one. Pretty mysterious and super interesting. Scent of Decay echoing through the empty halls. Again, it has an 18th century kind of gothic novel feel to it. So does this one. All of them. The Ruin, for the Ruin, I think it was Coleridge who was saying the Ruin is like the central image of Romanticism. Kind of like this romantic image, if I remember right. And Coleridge, of course, with Wordsworth, wrote, what was that called, that book that kind of launched Romanticism. I can't believe that's escaping me. Anyway, we can come back to Romanticism another time. Some interesting experimentation from Sabato, the Capybras of Ipausu. So, pretty challenging. Okay, like this, and of course he's working with glitch, and we'll take a closer look here. J-wavelet image Kodak, comp W image format, data bending glitches, source photograph taken in Ipausu, Brazil in 2019. So again, challenging work from Sabato, and he has another one. And you can see, what are these animals called again that he always uses? Capybaras. So you see this composition here of the 2 capybaras. It's also in that other work. You can see it here, right? So playing with glitch. So it's interesting to see where this goes. And you see like just even the outline here, all sorts of surprises. And he's not afraid, with this kind of like rough JPEGization distortion. That's part of the, again, that's a feature, not a bug when you're dealing with glitch, at least experimental glitch like this. So anyways, super interesting work. Very interesting stuff going on here. So really charting new pathways here in Glitchland. And this is by Sad Girl, who kind of uses anime images as source images, as far as I understand, and then kind of processes them and really turns them into their own thing. I think this was a 101. We'll take a look in a second, and let's look at the title. And let's just reset this. Implode. This is an edition of 10. And yeah, already sold out. Let's just look at the market on this. Sold out for 4 within like 10 minutes. Launched at 135 and done at 148. So in 13 minutes, all sold out. So pretty cool. And I think there's another Sad Guy whose work we look at, which is kind of similar. Kind of glitched out in its own way, anime type stuff. This is by The Side Hustle. This was released a couple of weeks ago, but I'm pretty sure I never covered it. RGB Room, a 1 of 1, buy for 30. So pretty interesting work here. I bet you if this was animated, it would have sold. Like there is kind of a bias. And this is kind of an interesting, the still versus the animated debate. And I think I remember Haiti Rocket tweeting out once, it's not like sell me your JPEGs, sell me your GIFs, this sort of idea. So anyways, interesting work though. I really like, there's a concept here, RGB Room. So yeah, just kind of very interesting work. 1 of 1 for 30, still available. Nicholas Dietrich also has a cool work. Where did I find this? This was in, it wasn't Tukes, but it was in it was in Byte by Bits collection that I came across this Nicholas Dietrich work, Equal and Opposite Reaction. And I thought this was really cool. Available for 2 Tezos, edition of 20. Just kind of interesting experimentation here. Yeah, like kind of looks like a turntable here. I'm trying to remember who the artist is that puts these. It's at the Berlin National Gallery. They have a huge version of that artist that puts these kind of sculptures together. A very famous modernist sculptor. Anyway, kind of looks like some sort of remote control here and like a firecracker. So playing with representation and abstraction. For every action, there is an opposite reaction, or for every action, there is an ... I guess equal and opposite reaction. So available for 2 on Object. And here are some works by Byte by Bit. So he's been experimenting with a video game. What looks like to me fake video games. And Ghost Shoes is someone who we haven't looked at yet, but who actually is the first person I came across who made kind of fake video game covers. And I guess Limbo has done that as well. Ocean Spy, Hidden Art Simulation by Byte by Bit. So anyways, cool work here. It looks like the Loch Ness Monster. Interesting kind of subtitle there, Hidden Art Simulation. I don't think we looked at that yet. Maybe we looked at it the other day. No, this looks brand new. And you see, here are a bunch more, and I think we covered one of these. So anyways, here's Solitaire. And again, it looks like it's created by Byte by Bit. What I like about Byte by Bit, I just picked up one of the nebulas, is he's really not afraid to be simple. And that's not to say these are overly simplistic works, but he's, again, a bold artist who's willing to go in their own direction until people accept what they're doing, not worrying about trying to be accepted by whatever people want. Like I find there's a boldness, which kind of gives it kind of a conceptual feeling to me. Like there's a surety, I almost want to say, with Byte by Bit's work. So Program and Design by Byte by Bit, Super Brilliant Chess. And here's another one, Pro Tennis, press enter. So it looks like he's creating his own kind of 8-bit video games, all made with PC Paint 3.1. 1 of 1's available for 20 each. Ed Marola, which with this kind of like, I almost want to call it it is pretty ambitious work, Infernico. And I don't think we've looked at this, so it seems to be referencing the Inferno. We have a devil with kind of the world in the palm of his hand. There's a crown. I mean, quite a bit going on here. And then this kind of looks like just a fuzzy thing, but then you see it's kind of a beast of some kind with a tongue. So fascinating pixel art here. And these beasts seem to be feeding on people who seem to be lining in. And again, the people kind of drift off into this abstraction here. Very, very beautiful, frankly. Like an ambitious work. What's going on here? Edition of 13. Are they sold out? They are for 666. So remember we saw the pentagram work on Christmas Day there. This one here. So kind of maybe they go hand in hand. We see a similar theme here. Here's Adam and Eve. That was an interesting work. I don't know if we looked at that. Eat that fruit. So anyways, a take on Adam and Eve. Very, like, and look at the background here. Like with this patterning and everything, this distortion, and then gradients. I mean, it's getting pretty sophisticated, isn't it? For, so-called pixel art. Continuing on, speaking of sophisticated, I absolutely love this work by Dan Control. I don't think he's minted it. I didn't see it. Anyway, totally awesome work. Of course, referencing Internet Explorer with the ASCII characters and then adding in some color. So really, really interesting and cool Internet Explorer logo. I thought, as soon as I saw it, it was just like, I loved it. As soon as I saw it, just brilliant. Turkarak, who again, I like to categorize with Die with the Most Likes, and Ezra Eslin is kind of like looking at kind of the more, for lack of a better term, grotesque side of the human organism, of human nature. So here's a longtime sufferer. So, someone having a cigarette, there's a gun, empty bottle, and maybe downing someone kind of desperate, downing some, maybe a beer or something with the TV, big TV on, this old furniture, and in a series called Absurdities. So buy for 3. Really cool artist. Turkarak. I found this in Turkarak's collection. This artist called Smonter, and I just hadn't seen the work before, and I could see why Turkarak would like it because it's kind of in a somewhat similar illustrative style. This is an Italian illustrator, and I just thought interesting to see always new artists here. Interesting, this pipe and everything looks like a little alley with blobs are chasing what looks like maybe a teenage girl or something. Run faster, they're chasing you. Where are you going? No, not there. Buy for $375, edition of 15. And here's the artist. Give them a follow. I'm an Italian illustrator. So interesting, all right? Secret Launchpad. So just kind of interesting, kind of undiscovered from my perspective. Artist, illustrator. Going into some AI, we have this Keith Haring reference from Shirley Preston, Dancing Toddler Party. I thought this was super interesting because if you told me that Keith Haring had made this work of a trash can or whatever, I wouldn't have been, I think I would have believed you. There maybe these dots I would have questioned, but if you kind of removed these blue dots, I might just totally think this is a Keith Haring. Or it could have passed. I mean, who knows? I don't know, but it might have just slid through. Let's put it that way. So Dancing Toddler Party, Midjourney, and Photoshop. So again, impressive stuff from the AI crowd, or the AI artists. This, I don't think is AI. First artwork from the collection, but it's unclear. This is an artist called Georgie Family Business, crafted with balance on my mind, and this sold for 0.1 ETH at auction. So kind of interesting, right? It's kind of sculptural. It has a bit of a Mondrian feel to it, but totally on an angle and has kind of a 3D Blender, even a touch AI feel to it. So just kind of mysterious works here as we continue to try and just discover everybody we can. Here's another work. There were 2. I'd say fairly successful works, aren't they? Interesting choice of the gray background. I think that's a good choice. And again, kind of like these 3-dimensional Mondrians, but more with like these, again, sculptural. It'd be tempting, speaking of traveling through the mediums. I mean, Could you 3D print this thing? You probably could, especially if it was made in Blender, I'm assuming. Kind of fun idea. Maybe you don't need to, though. Maybe this is the best way to consume it. How'd this do? So listed for 0.1, so this is order number 2, and the other one, I guess, is order number 1. And another AI work, which just kind of caught my eye on Twitter, I assume this is AI. It looks like it, because there's kind of a bit of that kind of AI distortion look. Just kind of an interesting work here. And this is by Olga Fedorova, who uses 3D and AI, Collab and King Kong magazine. Let's just look at their object really quick. Yeah, so I haven't seen their work. So just experimental artist, 3D AI, Olga Fedorova. So here it is. You can even buy it on object. Pretty cool. I mean, very interesting. Definitely has her own look. And these seem to be fairly recent, The Endless World. And that, my friends, is your show. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you tomorrow with our Rug Radio launch on Twitter Spaces. It's going to be on 2022 and just looking back on the year in digital art and NFTs and everything. So it should be an awesome episode. It's going to be a little more structured than last one. Hopefully co-host Guy shows up. And until next time, my friends, until tomorrow, hopefully, take care.